So, Andrew, as we think about the ecosystem, what are some of the key principles that pastors should be thinking about in terms of mission?
So as the whole context has changed, we're still seeking to see the same things happen, and the same outcomes achieved. One of which is, of course, we want to see people converted. We want to see people won to the faith. We want to see our people on mission, and we want to see people connected to Jesus, saved in relationship with Him. So that doesn't change. Just the environment and context changes. One of the powerful things about the change, though, in the context is that, two things immediately come to mind for me first. The first one is that secularism has been shown to be the illusion that it always has been. So if you take secularism as the ideology, the philosophy that says my life's meaning, hope and purpose can be found within this life, and there's no need to look beyond this to find my significance and so on. Well, this kind of pandemic and the fear that's come with it, the possibility of death, my family and so on, has immediately thrown up the fact that almost every point of security I might look to for my hope, for my future, my meaning has been shaken. And really into that context, the gospel comes with greater clarity, greater precision again, which says that the only real rock that you can build your life on is one that's outside of this life, the God who created it in Christ. So that's a huge opportunity this context brings us, and we need to speak into that well. But the other piece I think that immediately comes to mind that's wonderful about the context is the question of how secure can I be in my financial circumstances, my health, and so on. So security is a big issue, which gives rise to fear and anxiety, which the gospel speaks into powerfully. So we've got a great opportunity to make the most of this time. And into that deal, I always think in terms of there's kind of three levels that we speak into or have as a medium. It's the one to the crowd. You know, in our church context, it was one speaking to the group gathered, but one to a crowd, one to many, one to a smaller context, and then one to one. And one of the things Reach Australia has been seeking to communicate constantly is we need all of those pieces working. We need to make the most of each of those pieces because they provide different communication content and power, and each working together is really quite wonderful. And so the thing I think to identify is that each of those is now different. It's not like we've just lost the ability to speak to a crowd, because that hasn't actually been lost. And it's not as if suddenly the one-to-one is now all we have left, because even that's changed. The ability to speak one-to-one is different than it was 3 months ago because of social distancing. Now that may change again in the next month, 2 months as things are eased, but everything needs to be rethought. And our aim, I think, is to maximise each of them as a way to deliver the gospel. Now, of course, over it all, it's to be done in the context of love as we embody the gospel, but loving our neighbour, loving the world around us is not gospeling, it's not evangelism. And so we need to work out ways how to deliver the message of the gospel to the crowd, to the many, to the one. And it's a great opportunity to do that. And I just thinking one to the crowd, we have perhaps got an opportunity to do that in a way we've never had before. It doesn't come embodied in the way it once did in the context of congregational life and the beauty of the gathering of God's people together, loving one another. It doesn't come quite embodied like that. But nonetheless, we can now get the message of gospel preaching into homes that we never had access to. And so to maximise that, to think about how to use that, which therefore I think means as leaders, preachers, we need to be much more conscious of the audience shifting as we're preaching and delivering. We have a bigger audience, we have a more diverse audience, and I think it becomes important therefore to pay attention to worldview preaching in a way that we perhaps may not have needed to in the past, though I think always have had to pay attention to. Getting people to share our services. linking to friends and family, inviting others around the place to consider dipping their toe in to see what's happening in church and what they've been involved in. That is a huge opportunity. The audience that we can reach now is quite wonderful. In addition to that, it's easier to go out at night. 3 months ago, if I wanted to run an event, let's say, it was quite a challenge to ask someone to come out at night after they've been at work. Now all they have to do is go and switch on their TV or their computer and they can come out. And so the opportunities there, I think, are wonderful, and to take advantage of that. So there's the one to the crowd. But there's also the one-to-many and the one-to-one. With the one-to-many, I do think there's opportunity to think into that in a way that we haven't perhaps before. So, we're exploring the idea of having delivery of a gospel content in a live environment where people can ask questions in a smaller setting, inviting friends, family to come to that kind of place, and to make that work and pursue those opportunities. But then there's the one-to-one.
So Herdy, you would have done that at a Summerfest. That would have been the sort of tent evening meetings in terms of that.
And we've done it in the past. We've done it in the past with dialogue meetings. Where one person would sit in a lounge room and the friends would invite their friends, and you'd have 20 people in a lounge room and 20-minute talk, Q&A.
Yep.
And they were our staple for many, many years, and really wonderful context. Well, I think we can duplicate something of that in our current environment. And that's a little bit of what we're exploring.
So what about the one-to-one?
Yeah, look, it's always, we must never let the sense kind of be smuggled in that there's some of these things are more important than others. They're all powerful. And the one-to-one piece is a hugely important engagement with friends and family. And so as a church, equipping and helping our congregation think how in this new environment, how to speak more personally into their friends' lives, to model Christian security and confidence in the midst of all of this uncertainty, but then be able to offer a reason for the hope that they have, and equip them in that. So, for instance, for us here, we're thinking about running a series of training events along these lines of, how can I share my testimony, and recording it and delivering it back and forward, answers to questions and so on. There's a lot more capacity to do that kind of training than we might have done in the past. And people are at the moment in a very motivated setting. Well, actually, some are crushed by the weight of having to teach their kids as part-time teachers now. But there will be a new pattern will emerge, and a new kind of structure and order to life where their heads will come back out of that, and there'll be an opportunity to think about how to train and encourage them to speak with their friends. So lots of things that we can be pursuing. I just offer lastly, in my mind, there's 3 other pieces to pay attention to. It's remembering we're talking about pathway in a sense, where how do I get the gospel to someone? How do I then have an ability for them to engage in a real way thinking about the gospel? How do I then follow them up or establish them in a follow-up context? And then lastly, how do I get them connected into a church community? So as we think mission, they're sort of, you've got the 3 audiences, if you like, the one to the crowd, one to many, one to one, but then you've got the pathway. How do I get the gospel to someone? How do I get them in a meaningful conversation around it? How do I follow them up? How do I get them connected into a real community of faith where they can get followed up? So they're the things to pay attention to as we explore mission in this new environment.